Thank you for tuning in again this week for Help Nobody Told Me. I am Jasmine Shapiro, here with my co-host and business partner, Shannon Johnson. We're both local realtors for Berkshire Hathaway Home Services here in Chicago.
And today we have our guest, Suzy Carbrey, and she is an ADHD and executive functioning coach. All right, tell me what I just said, Suzy, because what does that really mean?
Well, thank you so much for having me to start. So ADHD and executive function coaches, we really cover a wide range of different things, but for the most part, we're working with people who have ADHD or executive functioning challenges, which we can go into what that means, but it's really what our brain is doing when we're getting things done. Everything from organizing our thoughts, creating a plan, pulling out priorities, and then regulating ourselves so that we follow through.
And most of us need that just to get through the day,
Yes,
don't we?
For sure.
And if it's not all functioning on the right levels, it makes it difficult to get through that day and be productive and move forward. So
your background is in speech and language pathology, right?
Yes. So I was a speech language pathologist in adult medical settings for many years. And so in adult medical settings, we provide cognitive and communication rehab as well as swallowing rehab. But I did a lot of work rehabbing things like attention, memory, problem solving. If somebody has a brain injury or a stroke or an acute or progressive neurocondition like dementia or Parkinson's, all of these things affect cognition and communication a lot of times, and especially executive function skills.
And that can be really frustrating when
Yes.
they can't communicate. I know my father had a stroke, and it was extremely difficult at the beginning. He did get his speech back, but yeah.
And so he probably worked with a
Yes.
speech language pathologist.
Yes. Yes. So, thank you.
It's rewarding work for sure.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So you have worked with adults recovering from medical events, and then you started to recognize some similarities in challenges in the general population.
Yes.
So how did that come about?
So I think I just started noticing that a lot of people are goal-driven, goal-oriented, but still come up with challenges like forgetfulness, lack of follow-through, life happens, and they just don't accomplish the things that they want. I was really in this phase of wanting to go out and do my own thing and feeling burnout being in medical settings. And so just that awareness that, hey, we kind of all struggle with these things, and especially certain neurodivergent people, that kind of started getting me thinking like, oh, maybe I should add coaching as well.
So what does that look like if someone wants to start working with you? Like, is there like a certain like tests that you give them, or what does that look like that you determine they're the right fit for you?
Yeah. So again, like all executive function coaches are a little different, but the way that I work, I do pull a lot from just the things that I studied and used as a speech language pathologist in cognitive rehab. But I tend to start with a questionnaire that will rank someone's executive function skills, so I have an idea of what their strengths and their challenges are. I don't really have a assessment process where I would say, no, I'm not going to work with you. That's more, maybe they're a student that I feel like would be better fit for somebody who works with younger people than I do, But as far as the assessment, we start there. What are their strengths and their challenges? And then I dive in a lot to what are their priorities and how does their brain work, right? Some people think in really micro details. Some people are big picture. Some people are very visual. Some are hidden. Some people are analog and some are digital. So I'm putting all of these pieces together with a person to learn how their brain works and what kind of strategies would work for them so they can follow through on the things that they'd like to. And then we're meeting and refining those strategies. And I always say we're building a toolbox, because as soon as we find something that works, it's going to lose its novelty and it's not going to work anymore. And so a little bigger picture, I'm helping people know what their red flags are that tell them that they need to change their strategies. Or we might come up with a proactive system where they do it every month or every season, and they just change up their routines and their systems so that they can be more consistent.
So what are some of the key executive functioning skills that we don't even realize we're using every day?
There are so many. We're using all of them all the time, Working memory is a big one. Keeping things in mind while we're working through a task. Planning and prioritizing is pulling out what's the most important thing here, and then creating steps to get there. A lot of people have trouble with prioritizing. Everything feels urgent, everything's important, so that's a big skill. Then task initiation and goal-directed persistence. That just means that we're starting tasks and we finish them. And so there's all these things that can cause trouble if they're not in sync. And that's why that questionnaire I start with is really helpful, because I see a lot of patterns where people have trouble with task initiation. Task initiation, oftentimes, goal-directed persistence might be in there, attention might be in there, and then I see patterns of strengths too.
Yeah, I know Shannon always laughs at me because I'm always making lists. Lists
She's
of
a
what we
list
need,
maker.
our to-dos, because we do get interrupted. We might be working on something and then you get a call from a client and it pulls, that might take priority, pulls you away.
Right.
Right? And so,
Well, we've been working together for a while now, so now it's just put that on the list.
yeah, it's like, or what's our list for today?
And
That's what she
I
always
think-
asks me.
Lists are really centering, because then you're like, okay, I can see everything that I
Yes.
need to do and I'm not going to forget it.
Yes.
And really, I should say, so you can group executive function skills into planning sort of skills, which are planning, time management, organization, and then self-regulation skills, which are regulating our emotions, managing our stress, being able to start the tasks and redirect our attention. And so you really need both pieces to be able to follow through with the things that you need or want to do.
And let's face it, life is so busy. I mean, we have technology, so we have 5 million things kind of buzzing at us all at once.
Right, and you work with parents and professionals who are really busy,
Yeah.
and they're stretched. So talk to us a little bit about how executive functioning challenges can intensify that sense of overwhelm and just really magnify those issues.
Yeah, I think life does that. There's so many things that are happening, and if we have somebody who's a parent and maybe they're a caregiver and they're working and they're trying to take care of themselves, that's a lot to manage, which is going to tax the executive function skills.
Did you tell her to say that? Did you tell her to describe me? What's going on?
Yeah, and so it really does intensify, because then you don't have time to take care of yourself. You don't have time to plan. You don't have time to rest. And then it's just a cycle of always reacting, always putting out fires, and not being able to be in this proactive place.
Right. It makes everything seem like it's bigger than it is.
Sure. And it's more challenging because your brain is just like bouncing all over the place. Your attention's not quite sure where to go. Your context switching more often.
But I think like texting and, phone calls and there's, emails, there's so much coming at you. Yeah.
That's a challenge.
It's easy to get distracted.
We're so
Yep.
connected,
Yeah. Yeah.
unfortunately.
So what are some examples of executive dysfunction? And what might that look like in like day-to-day tasks, like scheduling or decision-making or keeping up with home life? Like what would be some examples?
Yeah, I mean, you could even think about going through a day. It might be sleeping through your alarm and snoozing because you're just not ready and prepared to face the day. It could be not including buffer time to find parking where you need to go. You get to work and you don't have your charger or even your computer or the things that you need. And then you just feel scattered, bouncing from thing to thing. You might feel like you're reacting all day long and you just can't make progress on the things that you want. And then maybe you get home and you need to take your kid to soccer and they don't have a clean uniform and you don't know what you're going to make for dinner. And all of that ties into executive dysfunction and what it will look like.
That's not a normal day for everyone. It's just a normal mom's day, isn't
Yeah.
it? I don't understand.
Yes.
So what about ADHD in adulthood? Like many adults don't get diagnosed, they don't realize they have it until later in life.
I work with many people who get diagnosed later in life. A lot of times it's, it is their children who are having trouble and getting diagnosed. And then through that process, they realize, oh, my brain kind of works like this too, and I've just figured out ways to cope. And so that's one way a lot of adults either decide to get diagnosed or do a self-diagnosis. Another thing that happens is there is so much coming at us now, so much information, that I think there's an awareness of certain populations, especially women who were not diagnosed, previously. And so a lot of women are realizing that ADHD looks different than it would in a boy or a man, and they might decide to get a diagnosis as well.
So how does ADHD specifically affect executive functioning? And what makes it different from someone who's just disorganized? What's the difference?
In a sense, you could say executive function challenges are really, really foundational to ADHD. It's the kinds of things that people have trouble with who have ADHD. Inability to regulate themselves, whether it's their attention or their plans or their impulses. It's bigger than what we used to think of. And so now you could think of it as a lot of overlap there, right? Somebody who has ADHD is going to have challenges with executive function. The difference between somebody who's just maybe disorganized, overworked, has too many things going on is really an access difference. So somebody who has ADHD, they may know what they need to do very clearly, know what they need to do, they just can't regulate themselves to act on it. Where somebody who has what we'd call a neurotypical brain, they might be able to force their focus. They might be able to just put in a little more effort and still do the things, where somebody with ADHD is more likely to be, kind of in that like stuck paralysis, frozen state.
And that's where you come in.
And that's where I come in.
All right, so you talk about brain-based strategies. Can you share a few simple tools or mindset shifts that can help reduce the stress, increase, follow through?
Yeah, there's a lot of themes within brain-based strategies that work for the ADHD brain. So one is externalizing things, getting things out of your brain so you can see them, you can sort them, and it feels more manageable. Making things visual can help because you're reducing the load on working memory. You've got something to reference.
So that's the note making that we talked
That's
about.
the note making.
Okay.
That would be somebody who has really defined piles everywhere. They know what those piles are. They can see them. It helps them keep it in mind because it's in sight. Adding a sense of responsibility, just telling somebody else what you're going to do, or body doubling with them, which just means co-working. You're working in the same space as other people who are focused and working. That's really effective when you add in a sense of responsibility for people. And then starting with the tiniest bit, breaking things that feel big and abstract into tiny steps and just starting one small step at a time.
So if I'm listening today, how can I start to offload that mental baggage when it just feels like everything is urgent?
I think the first place to start is just a brain dump on paper or in a notes app where you can see everything that feels overwhelming. Once you can see it, usually that reduces the anxiety itself. I know if I feel stressed and I write out a list, I look at it and I think, oh, that's not as bad as it felt. And then once it's on paper, you can start sorting what has to happen today, right now, right? It's both urgent and important. And the next step, what can I schedule? It's important, but maybe it's not urgent. So then you schedule those things. What can you delegate? And then what can you just take off your plate? But once you see it, you can start sorting and then just take it one step at a time.
Very nice. I like that.
I know. So what role do routines or external supports or even rest play in supporting executive function?
Yeah, so back kind of to the brain-based things, these are things that help our brains reduce some mental load. So routines really reduce the micro decision making that we're making all the time. So things like what you're having for breakfast, what you're wearing, where you keep your keys, if you have routines or just standard ways that you decide to go about things, as long as it's working, that reduces micro decision making, so you have more brain power for the things that probably matter more. Rest just gives us capacity to take on the big things, and externalizing, again, it just reduces that mental load. It gives you a place to reference, and so that can lower anxiety and lower how much you're making your working memory work.
Okay. So what would you say to someone who's constantly beating themselves up? They're upset that they're forgetting things, that they're struggling to stay organized, and they're just beating themselves up over it.
I think I would say beating yourself up isn't going to do anything. It's not going to help. When somebody is beating themselves up, they're often in this state of like discouraged. And when you're discouraged, you don't take that first step. And so for somebody who has ADHD, it's a legit brain difference. And so instead of thinking, what's wrong with me? Think about what can I shift, whether it's a mindset, whether it's the way you're going about things, so that you can show up in the way that you need to, but it doesn't have to look like anybody else. I think that's a big takeaway, is that you can do things in a way that works for you. It doesn't have to be in the same place, same time, same manner as anybody else. So step back and observe, reflect on what's working, reflect on what's not working, and then experiment to go about things in a different way.
So if someone suspects that they or someone they care about may be struggling with some executive functioning, even if they don't have an ADHD diagnosis, where do they start?
A good place to start is to talk to their doctor if they are concerned. It depends for adults. Some adults are not interested in getting a diagnosis. They're not interested in trying medication. So it is a personal decision. But if it's somebody who would feel validated by a diagnosis, who would consider medication, a conversation with their doctor is a place to start. If it's somebody who doesn't necessarily want a diagnosis, they don't have to have a diagnosis to start to go about things differently. They can still work with a therapist, still work with a coach, still experiment with some of the strategies. And I think the biggest place to start is just to take a pause and reflect on what's working, what's not working, and try different things. But get help, get help if they're not making the changes that they want to. One thing I see a lot is that people will try things, but they'll put a lot of pressure on it being a certain way, and they have to be really perfect and consistent with it, and that's usually not what helps. Right. You've really got to have these structures and systems that are flexible.
And probably even that it has to work.
Yes.
Like this system has to work, and that might not be the right system for you, right? I mean, it's kind of a trial and error. I'm sensing that it's a little bit of a trial and error, right?
It's a trial and error, and then you probably have to switch it up because the ADHD brain likes novelty and change and spontaneity. So you find something that works, and it only works for so long. And I think there's freedom in realizing that, understanding that, and then maybe coming at it from a fun perspective.
Right.
Like,
it's a moving target.
I switch things up on purpose. And then you keep a list so you can cycle through them and you don't have to keep thinking about it. Because we like lists, right?
Right. So are there resources or tools that you can recommend? Like maybe somebody wants a better understanding of, to understand their brain and get support, but they are not quite sure what to do yet.
Yeah. In this age of technology, I think there's so many resources, which is fantastic, but it can also feel overwhelming.
Yeah. Like, which one do you believe?
Yeah, which one do you believe? Where do you start? You have this gigantic book that's hard to get through.
Right.
So one, I would think about what kind of information you like to process. So a couple books I recommend. I like Smart But Scattered. It's a book about executive function skills.
Say that again. Smart
but scattered.
Smart but scattered.
Mm-hmm. ADHD 2.0 is another one. So there's really some good books out there. There's also a lot of free content out there. I have a lot of free content on my website.
Which is?
My name, SuzyCarbrey.com.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll have it in the show notes.
Yes, I have a weekly blog and a weekly newsletter, but there's lots of people who are putting out good quality free content. I think it's about like not getting overwhelmed by too much. And then as far as tools, you know, things that make time visual, even analog clocks are super helpful because they put time in this visual 3D perspective where a digital clock doesn't do that. You only get this moment in time.
Right.
There's visual timers, so for people who have time blindness and don't recognize how much time is passing, you can use a visual timer. There's some great body doubling platforms that will help add that sense of responsibility for people. And there's some cool AI platforms that will break big tasks into small step-by-step things. And so, you know, I always start with what's free. Start with what's free.
I love that.
See what's working. You know, if you try a free visual timer on your phone and it works fantastic, then go buy the not phone one. But experiment before you go in and buy all the things. That's another thing that's interesting about ADHD is the ADHD tax. You know, they have the impulse to buy something and never use it, and so that's a tax, right? Or they show up late to things or forget appointments and you have those late fees. There's a lot more than just what we realize that happens for people who have ADHD.
Interesting.
What's your message if someone listening they feel like they're drowning in all these responsibilities and they just can't quite get it together? Like, what's the message for them?
I think the message is to pause, step back, reflect on what's going well. There are always things that are going well that we're not giving ourselves credit for. And then just build on that one small step at a time. Get help if you need to.
And I think that's a big one because oftentimes with ADHD, you don't slow down. So that pause piece, and you've said that word several times, is a big, I think that's a key one, is keeping that in your head is, okay, pause. Just
It's a big theme in my work.
take a minute.
Transitions are hard for people who have ADHD. They're going from one thing to the next thing. And without that pause to shift from one mindset or one task to the next, it just taxes the executive functions even more and makes it hard. So pauses and slowing down might be the number one thing.
There you go. So sometimes it's just about taking a deep breath.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And refocusing and starting again.
Yeah, because when you're drained and you're exhausted, you can plan and organize and time block all you want, but you're still not going to follow through very effectively.
Right. Well,
Exactly.
Suzy, thank you so much. You gave us so much great information. We will have all your contact info on our show notes.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for having me and for what you're doing here. That's fantastic.
Thank you. And thank you for tuning in. And we hope that you will like and subscribe and tune in next week for another episode of Help Nobody Told Me.